Hi, my name is Anastasia Dodge, and I'm a first-year PhD student here at OSU. I'm working in Swart Mitra's lab, looking at the effects of early life stress in rodents. My project is specifically titled Mapping Early Life Stress-Induced Behavioral Adaptations in Adolescent Rats. And I'm going to share a little bit about the background, and then we'll jump into my methodology and my results. So you may have heard the term adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And these are traumatic or abusive events that an individual may have experienced before the age of 18. And these events, the worse the clinical outcomes are. These events have been linked to these poor clinical health outcomes later on in life. And in our lab, we work with rodents, so we actually model these ACEs in rats. And the way we do this is through a method called limited bedding and nesting. And basically, it introduces these postpartum rat mothers, or dams, to scarce resources, which lead to physical abuse and physical neglect on the dam's part. So this project is so important because while there have been a lot of studies looking at the effects of LBN on adult rats, there's few studies that exist that examine these neurobehavioral effects of LBN at the adolescent time point, which we know to be a critical point in brain development. So in this study, our objective was, let's investigate the changes in adolescent social preference behaviors following exposure to LBN, or limited bedding and nesting. Now let's talk into the specifics of how did I do this. So you can look here at this figure for experimental design. First, we acquired some pregnant dams, and once the pups were born, we considered this to be postnatal day, or PND1. On postnatal day 2, the moms designated for stress were given limited bedding and nesting, which induced that physical abuse and physical neglect that I mentioned earlier. And we did observe this through the moms stomping and kicking the pups, and then she was also unable to form a distinct nest, which led to a lot of neglect on the pup's part. At postnatal day 9, the stress groups were returned to regular bedding conditions, and they were allowed to grow until weaning on postnatal day 20, and then eventually on postnatal day 45, which is the adolescent time point, we took them for social preference testing. So now you can kind of zoom your attention in here to the social preference testing box. This is called an open field box, and here you can see we have an experimenter rat, a bystander rat, and a novel object. So first, before we introduce the bystander rat and the novel object, the experimenter rat is allowed to just explore the entire open field so that it's familiarized with it and that the familiarization process doesn't affect our data points. So after this initial testing, the experimenter rat is put into the real testing phase where we have the bystander rat and a novel object. And here we just measure or record the amount of time that the experimenter rat interacts with the bystander rat, and we divide that by the total time that they spent interacting with either the bystander rat or the novel object. And we've graphed that here in our preliminary data section. So for the familiar bystander, this is a rat that has been housed with the experimenter rat for its whole life. It's known the familiar bystander, cuddled with it in the back of the cage. And what we saw was that there was no significant difference in social preference for the males and females across both stress groups, so control and LBN. The unfamiliar bystander is a bystander rat that the experimenter rat has never seen or been housed with. And what we found here was that LBN males interacted slightly more with the bystander rat than control males. Additionally, we saw that LBN females interacted slightly less with the bystander rat than control females. And those data points, they're trending data. They're not significant yet, but we're hoping to confirm these results with additional cohorts. We did, however, find some significance between the LBN males and the LBN females. We saw that the LBN females interacted significantly less with the bystander rat than the LBN males. So, in conclusion, we've seen some trending data that indicate sex-specific results and effects may be at play. However, we really need more cohorts to confirm these results. Because of this, our future directions are pretty clear. First and foremost, we're working to incorporate additional cohorts to verify our results and to further elucidate these sex-specific changes. However, we also have some ideas to further boost our studies and give us more data to draw comparisons with. The first way is to introduce harsher forms of stress in the form of not just giving limited bedding and nesting, but to give the postpartum moms a mesh to rear their pups on. And this mesh is much harder than just a limited bedding and nesting model because there's no bedding supplied whatsoever. We're hoping that by introducing a harsher form of stress, we may be able to kind of tease out these differences in phenotypes that we've seen, like a resilience phenotype and a vulnerability phenotype, to really see at what degree of stress are we seeing different phenotypes. And then lastly, we're working already to optimize molecular protocols so that we can observe changes in glial cell plasticity. So here in the diagram, I've just mentioned magnetic activated cell sorting, which is a protocol we've been working on for some time now, so that we can isolate oligodendrocytes and work with some collaborators to sequence these, looking at the transcriptomic effects of the LBN. Thank you so much for coming to my poster, and I hope you have a great evening.